It is 5 o'clock in the morning and I just cannot be bothered. I can't. Ladies and gentlemen. I need a good scratching. Hello guys, and welcome to Forensic Friday, where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing, that's right, my makeup. Today's video will be featuring, today's video will be featuring the BH Cosmetics 80s Dance Remix palette. I've already created one look with this palette. I'll leave the link to that video in somewhere. You guys know where. You guys are professionals here. You know where to find everything. Oh my god, does this just not blow your skirt up or your pants down or whatever the fuck you're wearing? I don't know, your pajamas off. All the other items I'm using in this video will be linked in the description below. I will also have my Etsy shop linked in the description below. All I have to say is crystal infused manifestation candles. Check it out. Please read the disclaimer. I am not a professional makeup artist, nor am I a professional forensic pathologist. I am just the average girl at home like you, planning my makeup. Sometimes I do my nails while we talk about a true crime case. So if that's something you're into, then you are more than welcome to stick around and hit the subscribe button. Also, a quick reminder, the comment section is a privilege. Don't fuck it up. Now let's get into today's case. Lucy, you want to say hi, babes? Babes, get out of there. Hey! Detective Inspector Lucy is here to make an appearance. She's a little grumpy because, like I said, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and she's like, no. Oh my gosh, she stole my scrunchie! Lucy! So this story all takes place in the year 1991. I know we've been doing a lot of 1990s story cases. But anyway, this story all takes place in 1991 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where 13-year-old Heather Church lived with her mother Diane and her 3 brothers. It was a typical day on September 7th, 1991. Diane got the kids up, she got them ready for school and got them off to school. She ran a few errands, she did some grocery shopping and picked a few things up before returning home. When the kids got back from school, they had planned to just have the typical family night. You know, they were gonna eat dinner, probably sit around and bond a little bit, maybe watch some TV, and then they were gonna go to bed. But then Diane remembered that the 2 oldest boys, they had a Boy Scout meeting and she had totally forgot about it, and she didn't hire a babysitter for her youngest son. I don't know why I can't speak. You guys already know, period, curse. That's all I have to say. Heather didn't want to go to the meeting. Obviously, it's a Boy Scout meeting. Who wants to hang out with a bunch of stupid boys? No, I'm just kidding. But I understand, as a young girl, like, she probably didn't want to hang out with, you know, these boys and whatever they were going to be doing. So Heather agreed to watch her younger brother Sage while her mother and 2 brothers went to the Boy Scout meeting. Diane was pretty comfortable with this idea because Heather had taken babysitting classes before, so she knew how to care for young children. Around 7:30 in the afternoon, they headed out to the Boy Scout meeting and they left Heather and Sage alone. About an hour into the Boy Scouts meeting, Diane decides to call home and, you know, to check on the kids and make sure everything's okay, that Heather's not having any problems with Sage, and to make sure she ain't slacked his ass, probably, from acting up. No, I'm just kidding. But just to make sure everything is good and stuff. So Heather answers the phone and Diane says that she could hear the TV on in the background, and she thought it was pretty late because at this time Sage usually is in the bed. She usually has Sage put down by that time. She talked to Heather for a bit and she said Heather was just like, I know, Mom, like, I just let him stay up for a little bit longer, but I'm about to put him to bed right now. So it seemed as though Heather had everything under control at the home and she was running things like a pro. Diane had no concerns, no worries, and she told Heather that she would be home in maybe another hour or so. So 2 hours later, around 9, Diane and the boys arrive home. Upon arriving to the home, they find it in its usual natural conditions. The lights were turned out, so the kids were most likely sleeping. Diane goes to Sage's room first just to check on him. She sees that Sage is laying comfortably in his bed, sleeping, having the perfect dreams of his life, you know. And then she goes into Heather's room. Now, initially looking into Heather's room, she just saw like a big, huge blankets on Heather's bed because Heather had these huge, fluffy comforters that she loved to sleep with. Like, her comforters were pretty thick, and I'm with Heather on that, okay? Like, I like me a thick, fat ass comforter, okay? I love that. Like, and it's funny because I'll have the comforter on, but then I'll also have the fan on. Does anybody else do that? That's what I used to do as a kid. Now I just open the windows. Initially, she just thought that, you know, she didn't see Heather's head or any part of Heather's body, but she thought probably she's underneath those blankets where she usually is. But after a couple of moments, you know, she just got that motherly instinct, and just that intuition started to come up like, nah, let me check on my baby and see if she actually in those damn blankets. And good thing she did, because when she pulled back the blankets, she discovered that Heather wasn't there. Heather had vanished. This definitely was not right and not like Heather whatsoever. She would never leave the home that late and leave her brother alone. Like, this was not like her at all. She had never done anything like this before. So Diane was in a state of panic. Her and the boys searched the entire home. When they could not find Heather, they started to call friends, family members, and neighbors, trying to see if maybe Heather had gone to their place, or like if they knew where Heather was. I should say too that Diane and the kids, they lived on a 5-acre property. That's where their home was located, and it was in a pretty rural area. So there was a lot of land around, and she would need help to search this amount of land. So she called up her friends and family members, and they all came out. I mean, there was a lot of people out there looking for Heather on, you know, this property. When they couldn't find her, they contacted the police. And when the police got to the scene of the crime, they were pretty shocked and a little bit horrified, because all of these other people were at the scene and on the scene. So they knew that it was going to be extremely difficult to pick up any, you know, evidence to find. Like, if there was any tire tracks or any extra set of footprints that they could pick up, it would now be extremely difficult to identify, because so many people had walked those grounds and so many people had been in the home. Like, they said it was like hundreds of fingerprints in the home. She's biting my arm. Why are you biting, mommy? What's wrong? I mean, all of these relatives had been on the property and inside of the home. They had touched things in the home. So it was just really difficult for the investigators to narrow down, you know, if someone had broken into the home. Let's just say the crime scene and the evidence was contaminated, okay? Like, big time. It was just 10 times harder to pick up and to identify the intruder when you have all these additional footprints and fingerprints in the home and tire tracks. She's biting me, guys. Okay, hold on. I gotta find out what she wants, because she's biting the hell out of my wrists. So, back to the story. Diane told police that when she returned home, she did notice that the front door was unlocked, but she just assumed that probably Heather forgot to lock it. Do you guys hear that? She's having a whole ass conversation over here. We're filming. Now, investigators didn't find any sign of forced entry. They found no sign of a struggle or that anything had been moved or out of place. The only thing that was missing was Heather. She was the only thing that appeared to be gone. All of Heather's things were still there as well. And the police had the audacity to tell Diane that, 98% of these types of cases are runaway cases. And Diane looked at the cop and said, well, this is that 2% case, okay? Because she knew that her daughter wouldn't have just run away. It just didn't make any sense. The next day, Heather's mom, Diane, noticed that the screen in her bedroom had been ajar. It had been like open a little bit. So she called the investigators back out to her home, and they collected the screen to see if they could get any fingerprints from it, because that was the only thing that seemed to be a little bit like tampered with. Nothing else in the home was moved around. So the screen was collected by the investigators and sent to their forensics lab. Now the forensic scientists found 3 main fingerprints on the screen, and they say that the fingerprints were really fresh fingerprints, so I guess that they were very clear. And so they were pretty excited, but they also knew that 1,000 people had been, well, not 1,000, I'm exaggerating, but you guys know a lot of people had been in the home. At that point, this was a home that, had a lot of people in it. So they were thinking, well, damn, this could be anybody's prints for all we know. But they were still feeling pretty hopeful that it was the intruder's set of prints. So the forensic scientists had to take all the prints that they found in the home and go down the list and compare prints, trying to get a match. And since there was dozens of people in and out of that home, this would take them weeks. Heather's disappearance caused a huge scare in the community. Everyone was terrified. They were afraid that their children might be taken from their homes in the middle of the night and never to be seen or heard from again. And so people were pretty on edge about this. It was a huge mystery. What happened to Heather? There wasn't a lot of crime that would go on in this community, so they were really taken back. The Churches, they lived on this huge property, and because they had all of this land in between houses, it would be very easy for an abductor to just come in and take a child if they wanted to, and nobody would see them. The neighbors wouldn't see, because the houses were so spread out. And this is what was scaring a lot of the people in the community. They were just thinking, Heather, she's just a 13-year-old girl at home alone, babysitting her younger brother, and then somebody just comes in and just swoops her up and walks off with her. And I think what's even more horrifying was that there was no signs of entry. There was no signs of struggle or anything like that. It was as if a ghost just came in and took her, or she just left out. It was so subtle that you probably wouldn't even notice her. I mean, you would have noticed her missing as a whole ass person, but it was just so spooky. And it's weird. It's she just walks off, but her brother is just still there. Police felt like they needed a little bit more help with this case, because they didn't have, the means to do everything. So they brought in an FBI profiler. And because there was nothing taken from the home, the FBI profiler suggested that perhaps it was someone that the family knew that came in and abducted Heather, because nothing seemed to be out of place. And the door was unlocked when Heather's mom, Diane, came home. Perhaps Heather let the person inside of the home because she knew them. So then investigators decide to take a closer look into Heather's parents. And the first person they want to look at is her father, Diane's estranged husband. And they wanted to see if he had any weird, bizarre, or bad characteristics that could possibly give him, I don't know, a motive to do something like this. Maybe he had some sort of custody battle or struggle going on with the kids, and he decided to take Heather. So they brought Heather's father in, Michael Church. FBI started to, interrogate him. They went in on him. They went really hard on him. He says that they were asking him really personal questions about his daughter, his relationship to his daughter, like some really fucked up stuff about the relationship between him and his daughter. And they were pretty rough on him, but I mean, these are questions that they have to ask because their main, you know, duty is to Heather, is to find out what happened to Heather, to find out where she's at, to find out her story. So, I mean, I can only imagine how it must feel to be a parent and to be a father and to go into a situation like that where you're sitting down with a team of FBI agents and they are just grueling you and just coming down on you. Is that a word? Grueling? I don't know. But you guys know what I mean. They're just bringing the heat on you and you're just sitting there and they're asking you all these questions that are weird about you and your daughter, and you're like, what? No. Like, hell no. And I can just see in the interview with this guy, with her father, Michael Church, that in him, the pain that he felt just even thinking about the questions that they asked him that he had to answer, it was very traumatizing for him, to say the least. But I mean, it needed to be done. But you could just tell that it was a very traumatizing experience for him. And he told the police that he had nothing to do with his daughter's disappearance, and that, you know, he was actually at a support meeting for divorcees. He had tons of alibis there that said that they saw him at that time and that he was there. Now, there was a time period in between Mike leaving the divorcee meeting and getting home to get the phone call that they had to kind of fill in. It was a very, very, very linear, like short time frame that they needed to account for, because when he did get home after the divorcee meeting, he did receive a phone call that placed him at home, because remember, this is 1991, so there's landlines, okay? Also, investigators had him take a polygraph test, which he passed with flying colors. Michael said in his interview that FBI even came down to his work to question him, and he said when he saw them, he just asked them, am I still considered a suspect, you know, after everything I've already done, after passing the polygraph and everything? And he said that the FBI agent looked at him and said, Mr. Church, yes, you still are a suspect in the case. And he said that at that point, he got so frustrated and he just started shaking his head, and he said, you know, I think you guys are looking in the wrong spot. Like, but that's all he could basically say. Now, Diane was also considered a suspect in her daughter's disappearance as well. They gave her a lie detector test as well, and she passed. They also interrogated her, and she said that it was a horrible experience, very traumatizing, but she also passed. They also took prints from her. They took prints from Michael as well, from both parents, and they just needed to make sure. You never know. Like, I understand that this could be a pretty traumatizing thing for a parent. However, like, from the investigator's standpoint, you just never know. And their job, their duty and loyalty is to Heather, is to the victim. So they have to do anything and everything it takes to find out what happened to her, to tell her story, and to get justice for Heather. So, you know, I feel really bad for these parents, like, that they had to go through this, but it is also just a part of the process. Now, the only evidence that they had really was those fingerprints on that bedroom screen. And so they sent the screen over to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. However, the prints came back and there was no match. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation had looked through all of the prints that they had in their system and nothing came up. So next, the sheriff's office sent the prints over to the FBI, and they ran the prints through their automated fingerprint identification system, also known as AFIS. Now, AFIS is said to be the largest fingerprint database in the world. Correction, it's one of the largest fingerprint database systems in the world, not the largest. At the time, it contained 45 million fingerprints, and that was in 1991. I have no idea about, like, today. So investigators are thinking this is the broadest fingerprint database system. Like, there is no way that the prints are gonna run through there and they're gonna come back with nothing. The prints came back and there was no match. If a database like AFIS, which is like a pretty broad spectrum database that holds 45 million prints, and they couldn't get a match, I mean, where do you look? At this point, as an investigator, I would just be like really questioning myself, like, where do we look now? The family was very devastated by this. I watched an interview with Heather's father, and Heather's father was really broken by it. He said that he just felt like he kind of was a failure overall, that, you know, he failed his marriage to Diane and all he had to do was protect his children, and now he's failed to protect his children as well, and he just felt like, you know, an overall failure. I mean, this poor guy went through a lot. He really blamed a lot of what happened on himself. Now, Heather's mom, Diane, says that she really just clung on to the idea that hopefully whoever had taken Heather was someone who couldn't have children or didn't have any kids and really wanted to have a child. And so they would actually care for her properly and wouldn't just abuse her or something like this. Because at this point, she wasn't sure that they were ever going to find Heather. And she just was hoping that Heather was okay. Years would go by before they could actually figure out whose prints those were on that screen. You know, they had done everything that they could. They sent the prints out and their prints did not come back. There was nothing, they found nothing in the state or national database. Even though it seemed like there was no hope, the family never gave up hope, especially her parents. Her father says that for years he was having hallucinations. He would be up in the mountains and he would see her, Heather, up in the mountains calling out to him, and he wouldn't know what to do. Like, he was having like these daydreaming experiences or hallucinations, I guess you would call it. Like, this man was really going through it, dude. He was really, really going through it. You know, he says that it was really agonizing. He kept seeing his daughter in places and calling out for him, and he couldn't reach her. He couldn't get to her. He couldn't help her. Whew, it sounds like one of those bad dreams, you know, that you just can't wake up from. You know, you just stuck, like, and you just can't get out of it. And you're like, fuck, how am I gonna get out of this fucking nightmare? 2 years would go by with no new leads or advances in the case until a hiker hiking in the woods discovered a human skull. Now it's time to go into the palette. But anyway, back to the story. Oh my God, I just love doing that little part. It's like my favorite thing. The hiker discovered the skull near Pikes Peak, about 15 miles away from Heather's home. That area was a pretty rural area. It was about 7 miles outside of town, and they found the skull laying in a ravine. The coroner's office said that the skull came from a young white female, which fit the description of Heather. Authorities contacted Heather's parents and they let them know that they had found this human skull that fit the description of their daughter. And the parents say that, you know, this had happened a few times to them, where something would come up and they would tell them that they thought that it might have been Heather, but then it would come back and it wasn't Heather. So, you know, I can only imagine just being on edge and sitting on at the edge of your freaking life, trying to find out, like, for years, trying to figure out what's going on with your daughter. In Diane's interview, she says that the news came on and they were holding the skull up on TV and they were just describing it, saying that it appeared to be the skull of a young white female, and just, you know, I wouldn't say nonchalantly, but kind of basically medically talking about the skull. You know, sometimes when people speak in their medical terms and language, like their professionalism, it can come off a little bit like not, what am I trying to say? Like non-caring is what I'm trying to say. but it's just that they're speaking in their medical terms and they're telling it. But can you just imagine seeing your daughter's head on TV and people like holding it up on the screen and moving it around and talking about it and holding the jawbone and whatever other bone over here, like, yeah, traumatizing. Like, I can't even, like, that's too much. So because there was like no skin and it was just bones left, they had to send the skull over to a forensic odontologist, and they were able to identify the skull as Heather Church's through her dental records. I mean, it was a relief to the parents, but it also was heartbreaking. It was like bittersweet because now they finally found their daughter, but not in the condition in which they wanted to find their daughter, you know? Not in the condition that anybody wants to find anyone, really. So it was very, very difficult for them. It was a lot of mixed feelings. Now that they had found Heather, investigators switched their focus to finding Heather's killer and bringing him to justice. The medical examiner found the cause of death to be homicide and the manner of death to be blunt force trauma to the right rear end of her head. At the crime scene, investigators also found a pair of female pajamas. However, when they showed them to Heather's mother, she said that those were not Heather's pajamas. So they were just some other female's pajamas, but not Heather's, which led investigators to theorize that possibly this was not the assailant's first time doing it, and perhaps they've done it before and dropped another person's body off also in that area, but they weren't entirely sure, and at that point their main focus was on Heather's case. So at this point there was no other evidence found at the scene of the crime, so this led investigators to also believe that the crime did not take place where they found Heather's skull, but probably somewhere else and then the body dumped there. Right before the case could go cold, there was a new sheriff that was elected in town, and he made Heather's case his first priority. Thank God for the new sheriff, because Heather's case most likely would have gone cold. Now, initially, the family was kind of against it because they were like, I think that the father said in his interview, he felt like, what are you gonna do? You know, what are you gonna do that these other investigators and the FBI couldn't do all of these years? What could you possibly do? They just felt like he was kind of, you know, bringing things up from the past, and they wanted to heal and move on from the situation. They just didn't know if they wanted to go through it all over again. But that sheriff was adamant that he wanted to do something. I mean, when you feel called to do something, do it, okay? Do it. It's your calling, trust me. So at this time, a lot of things in that town was switching up. They were getting a lot of new crime techs and medical examiners and forensic scientists from other places. And one guy that they got in particular, he was new to the area. He was from Miami. And they did things a little bit differently in Miami when it came to fingerprinting. Miami's technique was different than Colorado's, and he felt that he could possibly bring something different to the table that would help solve the case. Now, this guy knew from working in Miami, he learned that the FBI's fingerprint database, or AFIS, only held the fingerprints for criminals who were convicted of major crimes, not something like petty theft or breaking an entry or, you know, anything like that. So basically, the FBI's database at that time did not hold everyone in the United States who was convicted of a crime. It only held people who were convicted of major crimes like murder or, you know, something huge. So because of this, this fingerprint examiner had to identify all of the systems that had fingerprints that were not associated with AFIS, that were outside of AFIS. And so he had to basically call up all of these different states and find these databases, and he was able to identify 92 different fingerprint databases that were not associated with AFIS. And that's just the databases. That's not 92 fingerprints, guys. That's 92 databases. AFIS is one database, and it held 45 million prints. So I can't even begin to fathom how many prints 92 databases hold total. Like, that is a lot of effing prints, dude. Now, he needed to make sure though that these databases hadn't already been searched from the Heather Church case, and they hadn't. So the fingerprint expert, he had the forensics lab make a photograph copies of all of the prints and send it to the 92 different fingerprint databases in the different states that they were from. He even did Canada and Mexico as well, or New Mexico as well. He had them mail out all of those prints, and he just waited. He waited for something to come in to see if he got a hit back. And finally, after 2 long years, they got a match. The fingerprints matched 42-year-old Robert Browne. Now, Robert Browne, he had been arrested in California, here, the state that I'm living in, and Alabama for petty car theft. And is car theft petty? I don't know. I think it's pretty big, but I guess compared to other crimes that are going on these days. Obviously, he had a criminal background, but he didn't have anything for like murder or anything like that. And his fingerprints hadn't made it into AFIS database because his crimes weren't considered to be worthy enough of being in the AFIS database. So that's why they were overlooked, which I hope they changed that by now, because that's effed up. During their investigation, police found out that Robert Browne lived just a quarter-mile away from Heather Church's house. Investigators found out that Robert Browne, he was a tree farmer and he was married, and he had 1 adult son. Investigators put surveillance on him, and they arrested him leaving out of a craft store or a hobby store. I don't know, I just thought that was funny that he got arrested leaving a craft store. Maybe it's not funny, it's just funny to me, I don't know. Police say that when they arrested him that he didn't really look surprised. He kind of just had this look on his face like, you got me, kind of. He was really calm, he didn't resist. Probably he knew it was fucking coming because he had done so much shit in his life at this point. It was bound to catch up with him. During his interrogation, Robert told police that he had nothing to do with Heather's murder and he didn't know anything about it, that he hadn't gone anywhere near her home that night. And obviously police did not believe him. They believed that his motive for going to the house that night was burglary, but he just kept denying it and telling police he had nothing to do with it. Even though they had his prints, he said, "Those are my prints." He asked police if they would run his prints again because he said they got the wrong prints, and that, it's just like the way he was talking was so confident but just stupid at the same time, because clearly they have your fingerprints, and he's like, no, you need to check again because those aren't my prints, and I've had my same fingerprints my entire life, they never change. Like, talking to the police like they're stupid and they've made some major mistake. Police believe that the motive for Heather's murder was burglary. Prosecutors theorized that on the night of the murder, Heather was at home babysitting her younger brother, Sage. Around 8:30, her mother called to check in on her, and right after that phone conversation, Heather most likely put her younger brother to bed, and then she herself went to bed, and this would have been somewhere around 9-ish. Robert was out looking for homes to burglarize, and by the time he arrived to the Church's home, he saw that the lights were out, there was no car in the garage or parking lot, so he figured that there was no one home. And that is when he broke into the house. Most likely he made some noise that woke Heather up. Now, investigators believe that he most likely was wearing gloves that night when he broke into the home. They believe that he came in through one of the bedroom windows. The evidence did imply that he had some issues getting the screen off. Because of this, he most likely removed his gloves, and that is how his 3 fingerprints got onto the screen. So they believe that once he got inside of the home, Heather most likely overheard the noise and she went to see what was going on, and that's when she saw Robert in their home. At this point, he most likely realized that Heather could recognize him. So he hit her over the head with some sort of a blunt object, and it killed her instantly. They believe he carried her body out through the front door. That's the reason why when Diane arrived home, when her mom got there, the door was unlocked. So he loaded her body into a vehicle, and then he drove to a remote location in the mountains where he then disposed of her body into the ravine. Although Robert denied having anything to do with Heather's death, the forensic evidence told a different story. Now, to avoid the death penalty, Robert Browne pleaded guilty to kidnapping and murder. Let me let my hair down, girl, because we got this look popping now. We got her fixed up. We got her done. I mean, towards the middle, it was looking kind of rough. I was like, okay, we got some patchiness, but those lashes just covered it up. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, Robert Browne was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But that's not it. There's more. In prison, Robert could not keep his big mouth shut. He admitted that Heather Church was not his first murder victim, that he had in fact killed another Colorado Springs woman named Rocio Sperry. Rocio was a woman that had gone missing in 1987. And he told them that he put her body in a trash dumpster. This was not a huge surprise to investigators because remember, they found that set of pajamas that was of a female that did not belong to Heather near Heather's body. But what they were surprised about and that they didn't see coming was the next revelation that Robert was about to tell them, which was that he had murdered more people than they thought. Eventually, Robert Browne broke down and confessed to 48 different murders. He even said that he killed someone while he was serving in the military. Now, obviously, investigators have not been able to completely prove all the things that Robert is saying, like that he had this 48 victims. If what Robert Browne is saying is true, that would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. What did you guys think about this case and my makeup look? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, you can check out my last episode. I'll leave a link on the screen right here or right here. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please share because it really helps me out. And I'll see you guys next Friday with another Forensic Friday episode. Bye!